Dr. Akram here, and we have come to the final part of our cat rig tutorial where we're actually going to apply an animation walk cycle to the rig. Now, in the previous tutorials, we set up our cat rig, we got our bones in place, and then we applied a skin modifier to our model and attached the bones to the skin. In this tutorial, we're going to apply a walk cycle, and the cat rig system actually comes with some pre-built walk cycles and animations that you can apply to it. So I'm going to make sure that all of my items are unhidden and everything's selectable. I'm going to select the base human or cat rig here, and I'm going to go over to my motion tab and parameters. And inside the parameters, if I scroll down to layer manager, I have some layers that I can add to the rig. And the one that I want to do is I want to add a cat motion layer. So I add that cat motion layer, and I'm going to go from the stop button up here to play, and that applies the animation to the rig. And if I go to my timeline down here and hit play, you can see that my character is now walking, and it's walking, but it ain't pretty. And that is because of how the animation is made. It's made very generic, and it's made with very extreme animation motions. You can see that the knees bend back a little too far, and the hips are just shaking all over the place. And we want a more realistic humanoid animation, so we need to make everything a little bit more subtle. Now, one of the things that first pop into mind with animations is to simply change the keyframe. So if I click on one of the bones here, you can see that it does add keyframes. By adding that motion layer, it adds keyframes to each of the bones. And we could manipulate this, but we'd have to do it for all portions, and it's not recommended. It's just a sort of temporary fix. What we wanted to do instead is actually change the amount of ease in, ease out, and the actual amount of change in the motion. So I'm going to deselect that bone here. Now, the first thing we want to do to refine this animation is to limit how far back the knee joints can actually bend. And this is one of the areas where the movement is just too extreme. So I'm going to click on the right calf or shin, and I'm going to go to my hierarchy tab and link info. And here you can see that I have some options. If I scroll down, I have joint limits. And this is where we want to limit the rotation of how far back our joints can actually rotate. So in my X, my maximum is 90, my minimum is -90. For my Y, same thing, 90, -90. And my Z is going to be a max of 90, but a minimum of 0.1. And if I take a look at that, you can see that my right knee cannot kind of bend back completely like the left one is currently. And I'll just zoom in here. And as you can see, the right knee does not basically do an inverted knee bend at like the left knee is currently doing. So I'm going to repeat that on the left. Select my left calf, scroll down to rotation. Now that we got the rotation limitations on the knees, we need to address the over extreme animation behaviors. And this is where we talk about the principles of animation and the ease in and the ease out of how fast the movement or how intense the movement is. And we can change that in the motion tab. So if I select the base human, I go back to my motion tab. If I scroll down here, we have the cat motion tab, and I click on this, and this opens up my cat motion layers. And I am going to start off with the pelvis group right here, and we're going to start with the legs. I'm going to open up the legs, and you'll see that I have, for example, the knee angle. And the knee angle is pretty straightforward here. Now, what you will find is that, again, we're looking for that curve of extremity for the animation itself. So an ease in and an ease out. And currently the knee angle is 1, 2, 3, 4 frames, and they're all at a value of 0. So they're at the most extreme all the way across. There's no ease in or ease out. It's at a linear rate of animation. And again, you can come down here through the frames to see what's going on. So we're going to change that and create sort of an ease in and ease out effect. So for frame 1, I'm going to change my value here to 25. And I'm going to go to frame 2. And I'm going to also make this 25. And in frame 3, this is where we're going to change this up a little bit. We're going to make this 35. And in frame 4, we're going to come back to 25. Now you're going to see your line disappear, but if I go to zoom extents here, this is where we can see that we have this nice curve going on. We have our ease in and ease out. And it is a little bit of extreme as it moves from one to the other, but it's still easing in and easing out. Now these values are the minimums and maximums of the exaggeration of the frames. And in this case, because our knee is going to bend the most and have the most range of motion, because our knee pretty much can go from straight out to a 90 bend, we want this extreme motion. But for many of our other settings, we're going to have a very, very subtle amount of ease in and ease out. So let's take a look at those other settings. I'm going to close my legs for a moment and go to the pelvis. And the pelvis are the hips. And notice in our animation, they were going extreme to one side to the other and really shaking. And so what we want to do is we want to reduce the amount that the ease in and ease out has. So on the pelvis, I'm going to go to the twist, and you can see that this animation actually already has an ease in and ease out, but the value range is massive. If I go to my frame 1, if I go to my frame 1, you can see that the value of the maximum you can see our max value is at 10. If I go to frame 2, it's at 0, and our minimum value is -10. So I have a range of 10 to -10, and this is an extreme animation. So what I want to do is I want to change my minimum and maximum values to be something far more subtle. So I'm going to go to frame 1, and I'm actually going to drop this down to 1. And I am going to go to frame 3, which is our minimum, and drop that down to -1. So again, what we're doing in the following cases is we're changing the maximum and minimum values to be much more subtler. And right now this doesn't look quite right. Let me zoom in on it so we can get a better close-up view. And our number 2 frame and number 4 frame need to be smoothed out in the ease. So all we do to do that is to move towards the next point, and that actually smoothes it out. We'll just pick up the little Bezier curves, as they're called, handles, and just move them so that they are on the line with the other frames. And just, oops. Now, if you accidentally move the wrong handle, you can kind of move it back into place. We can go to frame 3 and make sure that we're still in the correct place. Or if for some reason you've totally got this skewed, we can hit the reset button, go back, zoom out. I can go to frame 1, set it to 1. I can go to frame 3, set it to -1, and then I can pick my Bezier curves right here. Again, you're trying to get these so that they kind of just smoothly line up to the next point. Zoom out. And you can see that I need to straighten this out so that it follows the path of the line and get the nice smooth curve is what we're looking for. And we're basically going to set the same settings of 1 and -1, which is a very subtle ease in and ease out, change in animation for the roll of the pelvis as well as the weight shift. We're also going to do the twist and roll of the rib cage, the head twist, roll, lift, and the palms, hand twists and flops. And so I'm going to go through that process, and then we're going to do a little bit different settings for the arms, the ankle, and the feet. Now we're going to look at the arms, and the arms bend is not quite as extreme as the knee bend, but we do have a little bit more bend in our elbow than, say, our neck. So for the arm bend, we're going to set our maximum values to a max of 10 and negative 10, which were what most of the other settings were set at. But again, you'll see here that the arms actually have a max of 20, so they're still very extreme to what we want. So I'm going to go to frame 1 just like before. I'm going to set the max to 10, go to frame 2, negative 10, and again zoom in on this. It gives me this nice ease in and ease out. The twist of the arm is going to be a 5 range, so -5 to +5, -5 for 1, and a +5 for 2. Again, I'm going to come in here and check my curve. The swing of the arm is also going to be set to 5, so 5 for the positive, and on 2, and -5 for the minimum value. I'm also going to manipulate the ankle as well. So I'm going to go down to the ankle, and I'm going to change the target align values, and these values will be set to 1. We want a linear animation for our ankle, so all values are going to be set to 1. So 1 is set to 1, 2 is set to 1, 3 is set to 1, and frame 4 is 1. So we get a nice linear animation for that, no ease in or ease out. And the foot platform and the lift max here for lift, come on. For the lift, we're going to set the maximum value way up here on frame 2 to 15. So we pick up our foot a little bit more than what is currently set to. So now that I've got my minimum and maximum values for all my ease in and ease out for the animation, I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go back to my timeline, make sure I'm frame 0, and I'm going to hit play. And you can already see the animation is looking extremely better. We can still see that the arms are kind of sticking out away from the character, and this is because of the way the model was modeled. We model our characters in a T-pose because it's a little bit easier to keep the arms away from the body and not select certain things while we're modeling. But what we want to do is we want to bring in the arms so they're not so spread out and far apart. So to change that, I want to go ahead and select the arms and rotate them down a little bit. And already that looks a heck of a lot better than the preset animation that we started with. Alright, so we have our model and we have the cat rig animating the walk cycle in place. Now typically if we were going to be exporting this out for Unity, that's how we would want our animation. We'd want the animation in place because the actual position and movement of the character would be controlled by the player. But for the sake of example and showing you what is possible with the cat rig, we're going to get our character here in 3D Studio Max to move across the screen. So we can do that really easily by creating a path. So I'm going to actually switch out to all views so I can see my character. And I'm going to select the cat base or the human base here. And I'm going to go back into my motion tab. And under the parameters, I'm going to go back to my motion editor, and in my global settings you will see that right now our walk mode is walk on spot, and we're going to change that to walk on line. So with that, I'm going to close that out, and I'm going to go to my create tab, my shapes tab. I'm going to go to my spline tools, and I'm going to actually create a line for my character to walk on. And what you'll find is that it does not have to be a straight line. It can be a curved line. So our character is currently just walking in a straight line. He's not linked up to our path. So to get our character linked to the path, what we need to do first is link a dummy object, and a dummy object is just an invisible cube that we can link to the path and then have our character follow that dummy object. So we're going to start by going over to our helpers tab in the creation tab, click on dummy, and then just draw a dummy object. Again, it's just a simple cube. With the dummy object selected, we're going to go up to animations, constraints, and path constraints, and simply select the spline. And when I do that, you will see it actually links the dummy object to the path, and it is moving with the path. The character's still not linked up. So to get the character to link up to the dummy object, we need to go back to our motion tab, select my base human cat rig, open up my cat editor, go to globals. Under our path, we're going to select the path node and select our dummy object. When we do that, if we look in our view, it might actually rotate our player. And this is just because of how it's lined up. All we need to do is rotate the dummy object in the right position. So I'm going to rotate this 90. So that gets our character in the right position. If we hit play now, our character is actually walking backwards. So we will also need to rotate it 180 in the left view. Now, if I hit play, you can see that my character is following the path, but he is shuffling about. And that's because the rotation of the dummy object doesn't actually rotate in the direction the path is moving, but we can fix that. So I'm going to go back to frame 1 here. I'm going to select my dummy object. I'm going to go to the motion tab, and I'm going to scroll down and tell it to follow the path. So when it follows the path, it actually rotates about, but now our character is kind of facing a weird way, and he's still kind of shuffling as he moves, and that's just because of how the feet are organized. And we want to change the axis of how the dummy is turning, and we want to go on the y-axis. You'll notice that that's correct, but it is backwards. He's moving backwards. So I'm going to also check the flip here. And now if we play this, he is walking correctly along the path. And that is pretty much how you apply your cat animations to your rig. If you are finding that your walk cycle is a little too fast or a little too slow, it has to do with the length of your path. So you can either change out the spline a little bit. You could also go to your timeline configuration right here and change the length of animation or rescale the animation so that it plays a little bit smoother depending on what you're seeing. The last item that I'm going to share with you is how to set up a render for this animation. So the first thing I want to do, I want to unfreeze my human that I have here. I had him frozen when we were selecting some of the bones. So I'm going to unfreeze all of the elements, and I want to go ahead and make sure my materials show back up in the viewport. I'm going to open up my materials editor, and with the materials selected, I'm just going to use the button that says show shaded in viewport again, and this will allow it to show up. I'm going to go hit close. And the other item is that while our material has shown up, we have not gotten out of X-ray mode. So I'm going to select the body, I'm going to shift select the hair, and it is Alt X to show him back up. So there he is. And again, you just want to kind of manipulate. You could add a camera in here if you wanted, or just kind of play with how you want this scene to look. And then you would go into your render settings. Now what you'll notice if I go into render settings, and I'm just going to render single frame real quick to see what it looks like. And what you will notice is that our cat rig is rendering. Now ignore the graininess, it's just the rendering engine that I'm using, but our cat rig is rendering in the image. And the reason for this is for really testing purposes, to get an idea if your cat rig is moving correctly. And we could actually even just hide the human body and just render the cat rig just to get a sense of the animation and see if there's any nuances that we need to adjust. Especially if you're working with an animation team and you've got an art director who might want to see the animation but doesn't want to load up Max and so forth and so forth. But for your final render, you more than likely want the cat rig turned off. So what you can do, I'm going to close all that. I'm going to go to my human pelvis here. So if I can do Control C and select, you'll notice that all children objects have been selected. So all of my bones have been selected. And I can right click on those and go to the properties of those objects. And what we want to do is uncheck renderable. And then I'm going to press OK. And if I go back to my render setup and hit render, you can see that it renders our character without the cat rig visible. Now, of course, if we wanted an animation under our render settings, we're going to want to set a range or the active time segments depending on what we're rendering out. But most importantly, if you are rendering an animation, you have to set a file location and a file type. In our case, we would be doing an AVI. We would set that file name and location, make sure that save file is checked, and then render out the animation. And that pretty much concludes how to set up, apply, and animate a simple cat rig to a model in 3D Studio Max. I hope you found this lesson informative. And don't forget to check out other lessons and tutorials on the channel. So what are you waiting for? Get creative today.